Hey y'all, so this is one of the first videos I'm doing in the art documentation process, and today we're going to be covering basically the difference in the types of brushes and what you can do with them. For like a nice kind of example file, I just have this simple little praying mantis I pulled up because it's not a lot of frames, and it's good at kind of showing the things I would like. So going over the first brush differences, here are basically the differences between brushes, and we can kind of like select a nice color here. So you have this, which is the paintbrush, and this it's called the brush tool, and this is the paintbrush tool. And here we can kind of see how they are a little different. So when you use the paintbrush, and that's what I've used to make this mantis here, and it is what I used to do the outlines, the black outlines for the avatar in some of the scenes, such as the entrance to the store, and as well as the security cam footage. So basically, when you make lines with these, with this tool, which is the brush tool right here, it's more of a shape, and you can kind of manipulate it in this way, and it will, you can recolor it with the paint bucket tool right here, and that's kind of how that one behaves. Then you have this tool, and what that kind of does is it makes these like and we can go to properties here, because the bigger it is, the more you can just kind of see what I'm end up talking about. There we go. So right now it's at 1. Probably let's make it 3. So then when you draw with this tool, as you can see, it forms more of a line. When you manipulate it, it behaves as a line. We can also go into each of these and kind of explore, there with the pen tool, so the lines, you see that are coming off this kind of paintbrush tool. It's all this kind of vector, and it is one line that can be, manipulated more in this way. Right, and then with, for example, as opposed to this one, and we're going to make it just kind of black so you can see what I'm talking about. The what's kind of formed by this one in terms of, you can see the vector goes all the way around the line as opposed to just being the line. And there's benefits to kind of doing it both these ways. With this, it's a bit more easier to kind of manipulate your line art and manipulate just the lines of your line art and just get a nice or cleaner line art more overall. And you can't necessarily, for example, if you're coloring the files, you don't accidentally, like, say, and this happens with this tool. Say I'm trying to color, like, this area, and I want it to be this kind of like pink. I'm trying to color in that green area. Well, I could accidentally color, the line art, and you just Control Z to kind of, correct that problem. But it's a bit of a pain in the, butt. But what's nice about these lines is they're a bit thicker, and it's a bit easier to tell when they're closed. And what I mean by that is you can account when filling and when coloring for basically if the vectors are closed or not. You see when you open the paint tool, you have this tool that lets you, it's the close gap tool. So basically, if I have this line right here, right, and say we make that into some kind of a closed shape that's happening. Right, we just make sure that's nice and closed, so we want to fill that. Alright, now the tool is on that you don't close gaps, right? You don't do it. Now, the thing about this is sometimes, basically it bases a gap on whether or not all these little, you know, dots you see within like the vector line are kind of connected to something. So I just go in and kind of remove just the tiniest like chunk that still looks like a closed shape. It's very hard to tell that it's not a closed shape, but that counts as a gap. So when you go to fill it, it kind of, you know, wants to give you a hard time. And you can remedy this issue by wanting to close small gaps, but then when you fill small shapes, it becomes a bit more of a problem, which is sometimes I like to switch to this tool for using line art, because here you can more kind of tell if there's a bit of a gap basically in the line, whereas Jordy in her files of the first scenario doesn't really use this tool for line art. So there is a bit of the difference between just this tool, which does these vector lines, and this tool, and that's the paintbrush tool, and as opposed to the general brush tool, which does lines a bit more like this. And with both of these tools and the properties, you can kind of go in and change in the properties, you can change, you know, the thickness of the lines according to your own, you know, wants and wishes, as well as the color. And then, so these lines can just be refilled with, again, with the paintbrush tool. These lines, however, also have an interesting property. So say you do a shape and you animate, like, you know, things perhaps maybe with outlines, and you want to give it a bit of this line around it. A thing you can do is go to this tool. So this is just the general fill tool, as opposed to this, which looks similar, but this is actually the ink bottle tool. So that what that does is it just puts kind of a line like this around your little shapes that you have. Right, so sometimes that can make things easier for you as well. But when you want to affect the color of these type of lines that you have, you just go into this tool, and then you can change up the color of what those lines are. Although mostly in the scenario, what you're going to do is your line art is just going to be black. So there you go. That's kind of a simple tutorial on that, as well as, so if you go into the properties for, so this is the vector tool, and then this is the brush tool that we use to make these lines. So you can see that both of the tools are kind of, they're set at 3 point. So the lines that you get with this and this type of brush tool with this tool as opposed to this tool, even if they're listed as the same size in the properties, they're going to be basically different widths because they are different things, with this being just a straight line as opposed to this being more of a scenario where you have kind of a shape. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is just generally when you use this kind of brush tool, the lines are going to be a bit more chunkier than what you have when you go on and do this.